listening to Sparking Conversations on Culturally Responsive Childcare, the podcast where we get real about what culturally responsive practice actually looks like in the day-to-day of early learning. Hi, my name is Sarah Andrews. I'm a public health researcher with a background in child and youth programming.
And I'm Thea Louis. I'm a mom of 2 boys and an anthropologist. I grew up in Germany and now call Edmonton home.
We're part of the team that was behind the Spark Guide, a guide to culturally responsive early learning and childcare in Alberta, created by PolicyWise for Children and Families, together with early childhood practitioners and experts from across Alberta. We're recording from Treaty 6 territory and the North Saskatchewan River territory of the Métis Nation, a traditional traveling route and gathering place for many Indigenous people. Each episode, we sit down with educators and leaders who share their stories, their light bulb moments, and the small things that make a big difference for belonging and cultural learning. So whether you're brand new to the Spark Guide or looking for fresh inspiration, we're here to spark ideas you can bring into your program tomorrow.
In order for everyone in that room to have opportunity, to feel safe and to feel heard, we are very thoughtful of how we create conditions for learning and conversation.
For this episode, we'll talk about leadership in culturally responsive childcare. As leaders, how do we create belonging throughout the organization? Cultural safety and inclusion is an important aspect of quality in early learning and childcare, along with the many complex decisions and situations educators navigate each and every day. To thrive in this work, educators need systems and structures that support their well-being, their sense of belonging, and their continuous learning and reflection. Leaders play an important role in building that scaffolding in each center, each day home, and in the sector. Today, we'll talk to one of those leaders about their stories, approaches, and learnings over almost 40 years in the early learning and childcare field.
We're more than happy to have Adine Shuchuk here with us today. Adine is the executive director with Jasper Place Family Resource Center, a nonprofit that has been serving West Edmonton since 1972. She has worked passionately in early learning and childcare field for almost 40 years, 33 of which at Jasper Place. Her experiences span work as an early childhood educator, as a support person for children with disabilities, a family support worker, program coordinator, and executive director. Through all of these experiences, she has been an advocate for the early years and for quality early learning and care. Adine calls Edmonton home. She is the mother of 3 daughters and grandmother of 3 grandchildren alongside her partner of 34 years. When not working, she enjoys paddleboarding in the summer, cross-country skiing in the winter, and reading all the time.
So welcome, Adine. Thank you so much for joining us today for this conversation. And you've been a champion for the Spark Guide for quite a while now, and also a mentor for many. You've been doing mentorship, and you have such a wealth of knowledge and experience in early learning and in quality in childcare. So we're really excited to dive into this topic with you today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here too.
We're going to start. I was going to say we're going to start easy, but maybe it's not that easy. We're asking every guest, what are the 2 or 3 words that come to mind first when you think of culturally responsive childcare?
Those are big words. My mind goes to, we are all humans. We all do and be life differently. And when we can share that, it's beautiful.
This is really grounding to hear you say it's about being human, living life, and there's a beauty in that. So I'm really curious about your stories and your experiences with this. So let's start a little bit talking about your journey. Tell us about yourself. How did you become passionate about culturally responsive childcare?
Well, you say 40 years, it's been a long journey. I can say I've always had a fascination with young children and early childhood. From the time I was in my youth, I see young children, they are people just getting started in this world. And everything that they see and do and touch is interesting and exciting for them. And so I find myself continuously drawn to young children. And it was with that, looking what will you do when you grow up, led me to the program at McEwen University that was in the 80s, early childhood development. I've just my passion connected there. And I feel like I made a little nest for myself in early learning and childcare and just grew my career from there. I think it's curiosity that's kept me in the field this long. And there's so much in the field of early learning and with young children that has happened over time. There's lots in the Spark Guide about brain development. That really, the science of that came along right when we needed it to. So there's always room to grow and learn in this field. The cultural responsivity piece of it has grown for me over time. The field has changed quite a bit in the last 30, 40 years. And our society has changed quite a bit in the last 30, 40 years. And the way that we are with people, doing and being with people is changing. And so I think that's where that passion is coming from.
In previous episodes, we talked about sort of the systems and structures and supports that need to be in place to have educators be comfortable in their own culture, identity, and in their work to create those spaces for kids that strengthen identity and sense of belonging, resilience. So now in your position as an executive director, what are some of the practices that you have seen work, that you've tried, that were successful or promising in creating those spaces and in creating that scaffolding for the educators to feel welcome, feel like the center is their second home, where they can be who they are as a whole person?
There's a couple of things that come to mind here at Jasper Place. It's values. We spent time together as a team, carefully selecting words together that represent the values of Jasper Place. Those words are relationship, community, inclusion, and learning. And so for us, when they come and join our team at Jasper Place, we begin with those value words. Those words for us work in that they can be interpreted by different people in different ways. People can see the word relationship and express it in a whole bunch of different ways, but it still brings us together. When we talk about community, that community might mean geographical community to someone. It might mean their spiritual community, or it might mean the community that is the playroom, but staying grounded in those words. And so we try to keep them as a starting point for all we do. And especially when we find ourselves struggling with something, we go back to those words, and we'll even go back and just look at the definitions. So that's one. I think under the idea of values and relationship, we really start just by taking the time to get to know each other. It sounds like a simple concept, but we really just need to take the time to get to know each other. One concrete way we do that at Jasper Place, when an educator starts with us, we work with them, ask them to create a biography. So they're sharing with their team members and with the families a little bit about themselves, who they are as people in the world, their picture. And we share that, we post it, we share it out to families, and we do it as a warm welcome to say, look at this beautiful person that has just started with us, and let's welcome them in. With families, something similar. We go through, we call it an intake process, but it's really, we invite the family and whoever they want to bring, can be a parent, can be an auntie, can be a grandma, whoever, to come and meet with us. They choose, would you like to meet with one of our educators? A few, would you like to meet in person, over Zoom, on the phone? And Those meetings just start with, what are the most important things you want us to know about your child and your family right now? Usually, as parents, I think we know you have these burning things like, oh, I really need these people who are going to care for my children to know that they need this blanket to sleep or whichever. We make sure that there's time for the educator to share about themselves too. So they talk about themselves and their life, their why they chose profession, their life outside of, and then continue on with the families. Just tell us what a day looks like in your life and bring in questions like, what are your hopes and dreams for your child? What's really important for you? Common things families share fairly consistently. I want my child to be safe. I want my child to be happy. I want my child to make friends, things like that. After that meeting, the educator goes back and writes what they heard the family share in a letter back to the family. So we call that a family narrative. And they'll write it in the first person to the child. So it would say, Thomas, today I met your mom and your aunt. They told me. And so it becomes a beautiful story. With families that English is not their first language, quite often in those meetings, we ask the families if they're comfortable to share common words that their child would need. And so then we can access those words. We write those words phonetically back in the letter too, so that we have them back and forth. And we really found, back to that value of relationship, it starts us off on this really good track.
I love all the concrete things that you shared on how that works in Jasper Place. I really love the idea of the educator writing a letter back to the child, reflecting on what they heard. That is beautiful. I wanted to follow up with a question on reflective practice, and how important that is in your team and your organization. How do you make space for that? What is your process, your structure? Like, how does this work?
That act of reflective practice, I feel like, has really supported our ability to be culturally responsive, beginning with one another as professionals and moving to supporting children and families. So we were so happy to see throughout the Spark Guide is the concept of reflective practice. For us, reflective practice is our value of learning. And like we say, lifelong learning. It can sound like an easy concept, but really it's not. It's something that we work with educators, we work alongside to develop over time. And it can be a simple idea in that it is reflecting on something that's happened during the day or something that you've said or an idea that you've had and thinking more deeply about it, having conversations with others about it. It happens in layers in a number of ways. So once a week, our teams of educators have time to step outside the playroom and they meet together, quite often with a pedagogical mentor to facilitate the conversation. They're called team collaboration meetings. And that is one place where those reflective conversations truly happen. We find it helps when there is somebody, when you're able, a pedagogical mentor, someone who is a little bit skilled in asking curious questions to get the conversation going. Although it seems once educators pick up the practice, they go into it quite naturally. We definitely appreciate in our reflective practice documents like the flight framework, like the Spark Guide, like the ASAP pyramid to help to shape up the conversation, especially if we feel like there is some unconscious bias or some difference of value that can come in. It can help us to go to look to research papers or to look to other documents. Sometimes that can be helpful. So those are times just the teams meet. Reflective practice happens there. We've also found that in our leadership team, so there's myself and program directors that directly support the educators, we work to build their skills in asking reflective questions. So it's to guide that those conversations go that way. So it will usually, they can be really simple things. An educator brings something to them. We're struggling to get the children outside. We've got boots and snow pants and mittens. It can start with a question like, what do you notice is working well? Where are you finding success? Tell me about a time when. And so the questions are really there to support the educator to think differently or more deeply about their practice, but also to acknowledge where their own insights and ideas come from.
So I'm curious, you mentioned a pedagogical mentor. Is that a staff member in your organization, or how do you access this kind of role?
That is such a good question. And one that you hear those words, pedagogical mentor, you think, where do we get one of those? And it sounds really big and fancy. Really, for us, it's an educator. It is someone who's worked with us over time. It is someone who's learning and growing in their experience. And they come into the conversation in that role of being the curious question asker, of being the person to maybe encourage people to seek other pieces of information. So that's my roundabout way of saying pedagogical mentorship can mean anything at any different time. But when we use that term or that title, I feel like it helps us to set the tone for the professional conversation we're really setting up to have.
So let's get into some stories that you might have from your many years of experience. Do you have a story where a topic was discussed and reflected as a team, and you could feel that there was a safe space, that there was a conversation that helped everyone feel they belong and they could bring themselves and their culture into the work?
So many stories of learning. And some of them, when I look back, I think, oh, how did we used to do that? But that's learning, brings you forward. So I think in the beginning, we had what we called them staff meetings. And staff meetings meant whoever's in the leader position, quotations, stands at the front and feeds people information and says, this is how it's going to be, and this is what's happening, and here's this new policy. And the rest of the team is just meant to listen, take it in, and do what they're told. That evolved over time as we started to understand the importance of wanting people to feel seen and heard and have a place. We renamed those staff meetings a number of years ago to now be called communities of practice. And so some learning there is, in order for everyone in that room to have opportunity, to feel safe and to feel heard, we are very thoughtful. And when I say we, it's the whole team creating this together, of how we create conditions for learning and conversation. So at some point, it may be someone standing at the front sharing a new piece of information. At other points during those communities of practice, it will be a small table, groups of people in 4 having a smaller conversation. And then at other times, it might be people just writing on their own and then sharing as they're comfortable. It might be that they're having conversations in partnership. We really discovered, I think, by making mistakes, realizing, wow, if we only have this one format where if you want to be heard, you need to be comfortable speaking to 20 people, we started to notice some of the educators never shared. And when we could create different spaces for that, we started to see when you have 2 educators in a dialogue, they will share differently with each other than if it's a large group. There's a different level of safety there. So that was one learning that we keep continuing to learn. Now we're working on, there's so much knowledge in the room. There is people with expertise that we're just uncovering. So we play around with having different people lead conversations. the way they facilitate things, the way that sometimes we do hands-on experiential activities that someone might be more comfortable with. So I think that would be one. Another learning that happened in a community of practice is we used to have this communication agreement that was written by probably me. Yes. But it was very much, I guess I want to use the word dictated, as in, I will decide this is how we shall communicate as a group, and this document will be given to you, and you will comply. Our learning over time, and as people in our group are comfortable and felt safer to share, they could bring up points of the communication agreement that did not fit culturally for them. So one example is the idea that if you have a problem, you go directly to that person who is causing a problem for you, and you must tell them. And we got to understand, as we listened more closely to one another, that for some people, the idea of going directly to someone, especially if that someone is an elder to you or has more education or more experience, that just simply will not happen. That's just not. And so when we could listen to examples like that, we came to a place where we wrote that communication agreement together. It was shared and it had points in it. It takes us a long time and to create something like that and come back and redraft it. But we really noticed a difference in people's buy-in to that and the way that we practice together, and people's increased safety in being able to share what some of those agreements mean. So that's a couple of big examples.
You've reflected on how you're a lifelong learner and how your program practices have also changed to reflect the growing learnings that you as a team have been having. I wonder if you can share what are those little signs and signals, those very visible, tangible things that you've noticed as a leader that have shown you that you are on the right direction, that you have those shifts had a meaningful impact in your staff and how they can show up as their full selves at work. What are those signs and signals that you look out for?
Something I notice and intentionally watch for is when people share freely, when I can see in a conversation between educators that someone is taking a risk to share an idea or a thought that might be different from the rest of the group. That's a sense we get. And I would think the same, we feel like we've built something safe and responsive with families when it's the same, when families we see sharing. And when I say sharing freely, I do think I feel people taking a little bit of a risk. And the example I think of when I talked about the communication agreement, and it was an educator who over time that felt comfortable enough to say, this statement in the communication agreement doesn't really fit for me. That's a signal.
Thank you for highlighting those signals that you look for in your team. Can you share how that has translated, or how does it impact the quality or program itself and the children who participate in it? What do you see?
It's interesting, the more that we dig deeply into what it means to be culturally responsive, the more that we realize we can't use the language of quality childcare without understanding and working towards being culturally responsive. I feel like you can't have one without the other. For us in quality childcare, we keep learning over and over again how we need to slow down and take time to build healthy teams. You're in a room with 12 two-year-olds all day long. You can't create a much more physically, emotionally taxing time. It's very human. There's a lot of care there. There's a lot of wiping noses and changing pants and accidents and people losing control and screaming and crying. That yet there's a lot to it. When we can slow down and make time for that team to know each other and to talk about in Spark, it talks about the iceberg, and there's the tip of the iceberg. What do we celebrate? What do we eat? When we can take time as professionals, as educators, to talk about those more deeper things. How do I solve problems? How do I react when I'm stressed? How do I like to be approached if you'd like me to make a change in my practice? When we take time for that, it very easily translates then into how we can be culturally responsive with families and children. In quality childcare, it's like a chicken and egg scenario because you hear a lot in the field about high staff turnover. Quite often we find staff turnover and they leave because maybe they didn't feel supported and heard and understood. So they leave. But then you get into the situation where people can't get together and know each other because people aren't staying long enough. So that when we can take time to slow down and set that solid foundation, it helps us to build that consistency, which is another indicator of quality. When you've got the same educators taking time to build relationships with families over time.
Thank you for explaining that. I think it really emphasizes that culture, like you said, with the iceberg, there's a tip of it. But that same goes for relationships as well. And going deeper builds that trust. And like you have mentioned throughout today, is building that curiosity of people and culture. We wanted to end all of our episodes off with asking if you could share one key piece of advice you would offer to someone who's new to leadership in culturally responsive childcare. What would you share with them?
Hard to think just one. Top of my mind is slow down. Do much as you can collaboratively. Our little motto here is do with, not to. So whenever we try to create a new policy or make a decision with a family, we work to do it collaboratively. And I think the last one is look for the expertise in the room. It never ceases to amaze me the gifts that families come with, the gifts that educators come with, and we can make space for that to shine. It's pretty cool.
As we wrap up our episode today, we'll share a takeaway that we're going to walk away with this conversation with. For me, what resonated the most is how you started with your values. And just from the stories you've shared today, you can see how those values have showed up from your community of practice, even how from those meetings and way you meet with your staff to how you bring on new families into the program, you can really feel how you're so grounded in those values. Taya, what has stood out for you?
Thanks so much, Adine, for this conversation. It was great to have that leadership perspective and see how you practice this from your position, what this looks like from a position of a leader. And I'm leaving with so many practical ideas that you shared, but I think what stood out for me the most is that your leadership style, it shines through from how you're sharing, and there's so much love and humility and curiosity there that I think that is such a great foundation that you bring to this work that then allows you to come up with all these ideas and learnings and whatever the context might require and whatever the shifting situations might throw at you. So thank you so much.
I think the pieces that I'm leaving with are similar to what you've shared. It's the word curious. Stay curious. That's a big piece of advice. And that idea of being vulnerable, make mistakes, admit the mistakes, learn from the mistakes. So curiosity and a little vulnerability.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I think this has been a really inspiring episode for people to hear. And thank you again for sharing your experiences. Thanks for listening. Check out the show notes for any links or resources that were mentioned in today's episode. And if you want to learn more about culturally responsive childcare, go to sparkguide.ca to download the Spark Guide, access free trainings, and find more resources. See you in the next episode.